Night fell over the desert, but the darkness did not bring silence. It brought fire. Long trenches had been carved into the earth, deep, wide, deliberate. They were not built for protection. They were built for punishment. Flames roared upward, devouring the dry wood stacked carefully inside. Sparks climbed into the sky as if trying to escape what was about to happen below. Around the trenches stood soldiers. Behind them sat a king, and before them stood believers. The Quran describes this moment with chilling precision. Cursed were the companions of the trench, the fire full of fuel, when they were sitting near it, and they were witnesses to what they were doing to the believers. Surah Al-Buruj 85, 4-7. They were sitting, watching, not in chaos, not in confusion, but in calm cruelty. This was not an accident. This was not war. This was a public execution designed to break faith. One by one, the believers were brought forward. They were given a simple choice: abandon your belief in Allah or be thrown into the fire. Some were elderly, some were young. Some were parents holding their children close. They had no weapons, no army, no political power. Their only crime was belief. The king believed fear could erase faith. He believed flames could silence conviction. He believed pain could overpower truth. But something else was happening that night. As the fire burned, the believers did not beg for mercy from the king. They did not curse their fate. They did not negotiate their faith. Their bodies trembled, but their belief did not. The Quran does not name the tyrant. It does not give him honor. It does not preserve his legacy. Instead, it immortalizes the victims. Why? Because in Allah's sight, power is not measured by throne or army, but by sincerity of belief. The tyrants thought they were destroying people. In reality, they were revealing them. The flames were meant to humiliate. Instead, they elevated. The trenches were meant to terrify. Instead, they testified. And history would not remember the king as victorious. It would remember him as cursed. But who were these believers? How did their faith spread in the first place? And what terrified a king so much that he ordered human beings to be burned alive simply for believing in one God? To understand the fire, we must go back to the beginning. Long before the trenches were dug, before the flames rose into the night sky, there was a boy. He was young, curious, and sent daily on a path chosen for him by the king. The ruler of that land had appointed a powerful magician to maintain influence over the people. As the magician grew old, he demanded a successor. The king selected a boy to be trained in sorcery, someone who could preserve fear, illusion, and control for the throne. But destiny intervened. On his way to the magician, the boy would pass by a monk, a quiet man devoted to the worship of Allah. The monk spoke of truth, of one God, of faith beyond fear. Something in the boy's heart responded. He began stopping to listen. Each day, he would arrive late to the magician's lessons, punished for delay. Each evening, he would return home late from the monk, beaten for absence. Between fear and faith, the boy stood in the middle. One day, a beast blocked the path of the people. The crowd froze in terror. The boy, now torn between two worlds, whispered a prayer. "O Allah, if the monk's path is more beloved to you than the magician's, then allow me to kill this beast." He picked up a stone and threw it. The beast fell. It was not magic, it was belief. From that moment, the boy understood the difference between illusion and truth. The monk confirmed it. This was not sorcery, it was faith. And faith was stronger than fear. The boy began healing the blind, curing the sick, not by his own power, but by the permission of Allah. Word spread quickly. The kingdom felt something shifting beneath its surface. People were whispering about the boy, about miracles, about belief. Even members of the king's court began seeking him. One nobleman, blind for years, came with gifts, asking for sight. The boy told him plainly, I do not heal anyone. It is Allah who heals." The nobleman believed, and he saw again. But power does not tolerate competition. When the king learned that his courtier had regained sight, he demanded to know how. Under pressure, the nobleman confessed, "It was not magic, it was Allah." The king was enraged. He tortured the nobleman until he revealed the boy. Then he tortured the boy until he revealed the monk. The monk was brought before the king and ordered to renounce his faith. He refused. A sore was placed upon his head. His body was split in two. The nobleman was given the same choice. He refused. He was executed. Now the king turned to the boy. But something unexpected happened. Every attempt to kill him failed. He was thrown from a mountain and survived, sent into the sea and returned unharmed. Each failed execution only strengthened the people's belief. The king did not realize he was witnessing the collapse of fear. Finally, the boy told him how to succeed. "You will not be able to kill me," he said, "until you gather the people, tie me to a tree, take an arrow from my quiver, and say, 'In the name of Allah, the Lord of the boy,' then shoot." The king followed the instructions. He said the words. He shot the arrow. The boy died. But the crowd shouted as one, "We believe in the Lord of the boy." In that single moment, the king lost control of his kingdom. And that is when he chose fire. The king had killed the boy. He thought the arrow would silence the movement. Instead, it ignited it. The moment the boy fell, the people did not run in fear. They did not retreat into silence. They proclaimed openly, "We believe in the Lord of the boy." The king realized something terrifying. The execution had not crushed faith. It had exposed it. For years, fear had held the kingdom together. Magic, illusion, punishment, these were his tools. But now the people had witnessed something undeniable. The boy had taught them the truth. Even in death, he had defeated deception. Power that depends on fear cannot survive belief. And so the king made a decision that would stain history. If he could not stop faith with secret torture, he would stop it with public terror. He ordered trenches to be dug across the land, long, deep ditches carved into the earth. They were not shallow graves. They were engineered for spectacle. Wood was gathered, oil was poured, flames were prepared. This would not be a quiet execution. This would be a message. When the trenches were ready, the fires were lit. The flames rose high, crackling violently against the night sky. The heat could be felt from a distance. Soldiers stood guard. Crowds were gathered. The king positioned himself near the blaze. And then the believers were brought forward, one by one. The command was simple: renounce your faith, or be thrown into the fire. There was no third option. Some were asked publicly, some were pressured privately, families were separated, elders were threatened, children were forced to watch. This was psychological warfare. The king believed that watching others burn would shatter conviction, that screams would silence testimony, that survival instinct would overpower spiritual certainty. But something extraordinary happened. They refused. Men stepped forward and declared their belief openly. Women stood firm, despite the inferno before them. Young and old chose faith over life. The Quran captures the cruelty with haunting clarity. They were witnesses over what they were doing to the believers. They were watching. They observed the suffering. They enjoyed the spectacle. They thought they were winning. But what they did not understand was this: they were creating martyrs. Every believer thrown into the trench became a testimony. Every refusal strengthened the crowd. Every execution weakened the illusion of control. The fire roared, bodies fell, smoke rose into the sky. But the king's authority was burning faster than the wood. This was no longer about punishment. It was about desperation. Because when tyranny realizes it is losing control, it becomes more violent. not less. Yet there was one moment during this horror that would define the entire story. A mother stepped forward, and she hesitated. What happened next would prove that the fire could consume bodies. But it could not consume faith. The flames were merciless. They did not flicker gently. They roared, hungry, violent, alive. The heat pressed against the skin of everyone standing near the trench. Smoke filled the air. The cries of the burning had already shaken the ground beneath the soldiers' feet. And then she stepped forward, a mother. In her arms, a child. She had watched others walk toward the fire without turning back. She had seen fathers choose faith over life. She had seen young believers close their eyes and step into the blaze with certainty. But now, it was her turn. The soldiers pushed her closer to the trench. The heat intensified. Her grip tightened around her infant. For a moment, just a moment, she hesitated. Not because she doubted Allah, not because she questioned truth, but because she was a mother. The instinct to protect her child clashed violently with the fire before her. The fear was not for herself. It was for the small life resting against her chest. This was the king's final weapon. He believed no parent would choose faith over their child's survival. He believed love would break conviction. He believed instinct would overpower belief. He watched carefully, waiting. The trench crackled louder. The soldiers demanded her answer, "Renounce your faith and walk away or burn." Her heart trembled, and then something miraculous happened. The infant in her arms spoke. By the will of Allah, the baby addressed his mother and said, "O mother, be patient. You are upon the truth." In that single moment, hesitation vanished, fear dissolved. The mother's choice became clear. This was not loss, this was victory. She stepped forward, not in panic, not in despair, but in certainty. She chose Allah over the world. She entered the fire holding her child, and history would remember her not as a victim, but as a martyr. The king thought he had found the breaking point. Instead, he witnessed something that shattered his power completely. Because when even a mother chooses faith over fear, tyranny has already failed. The fire consumed bodies, but it could not touch belief. It could burn flesh, but it could not burn conviction. That day, the trenches did not destroy faith. They exposed it. The believers were thrown into flames, yet their names were elevated by Allah. The king sat near the fire, believing he had won. But the Quran did not preserve his throne. It preserved their sacrifice. The mother who hesitated did not fall. She rose, and her story would echo across generations as proof that true strength is not found in power, but in patience. The flames died eventually. The trenches turned to ash, but the lesson remained. Faith that survives fire cannot be erased by kings. The flames ended, the trenches cooled, the bodies turned to ash. But the story did not disappear. It was recorded, not in history books, not in royal archives, not in the records of kings, but in the Quran itself. Surah Al-Buruj does something powerful. It does not tell the entire backstory. It does not mention the boy. It does not mention the monk. It does not describe the mountain or the sea. It does not even name the king. Instead, it focuses on one thing: the crime. And they resented them not except because they believed in Allah, the exalted in might, the praiseworthy. That was their only crime. They believed. Notice something remarkable. Allah does not preserve the tyrant's name. He does not give him honor. He does not allow him immortality through recognition. But the believers, the ones burned alive, are mentioned with dignity. The Quran curses the oppressors. Cursed were the companions of the trench, not pitied, not excused. Cursed. This is divine judgment. The king thought he was powerful because he controlled life and death. But Allah reveals the truth. Ultimate authority belongs only to Him, to whom belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. The tyrant believed he was the highest authority in the land, but his control was temporary. His fire was temporary. His throne was temporary. Allah's judgment is not. Then comes one of the most powerful verses in the surah. Indeed, those who have tortured the believing men and believing women and then have not repented, for them is the punishment of hell. Notice the precision. Allah does not forget. He does not overlook injustice. He does not allow oppression to vanish without consequence. The king burned believers in fire. Allah warns him of a greater fire. This is not revenge, it is justice. And then comes hope. Indeed, those who have believed and done righteous deeds, for them are gardens beneath which rivers flow. The trenches were deep, but paradise is deeper. The flames were intense, but Jannah is eternal. The believers lost their lives in the world, but they gained something greater. This surah is not just about past suffering, it is about perspective. The tyrant saw the fire as victory. Allah saw it as testimony. The world saw defeat. Allah saw triumph. That is why their story was revealed in the Quran, not as tragedy, but as honor. Because when faith is tested in the most brutal way and remains firm, it becomes eternal. But this surah was not only about them. It was revealed for someone else, for believers facing their own fire. Surah Al-Buruj was not revealed in comfort. It was revealed in Makkah, at a time when believers were being crushed. The early Muslims were few, weak in number, surrounded by a powerful elite that controlled trade, politics, and social order. To accept Islam meant risking everything: reputation, family, wealth, safety. Some were tortured in the open desert, some were beaten in the streets, some were imprisoned inside their own homes. The powerful leaders of Quraysh believed persecution would extinguish the message of Islam before it could spread. They used mockery, economic boycotts, physical torture, whatever it took to stop belief from growing. One companion was dragged across burning sand under the scorching sun. Heavy stones were placed upon his chest. He was ordered to renounce his faith. He refused. Others were whipped. Some were starved. Some were separated from their families. Faith became a test of survival, and in the middle of this oppression, Allah revealed the story of the people of the trench. Why? Because the early Muslims needed perspective. They needed to know, you are not alone. Before you, there were believers who faced fire, not metaphorical fire, but literal flames, and they did not break. The Quran was strengthening their hearts. It was saying, what you are experiencing is painful, but it is not new. The path of truth has always been tested, and the outcome has always belonged to Allah. The Makkan oppressors believed they were winning, just like the king of the trench believed he had won. But Surah Al-Buruj shifts the lens from immediate suffering to ultimate consequence. It reminds believers that Allah is witness over everything. Nothing escapes him. Every tear, every bruise, every cry in the night, every act of cruelty. The tyrants may sit and watch believers suffer, but Allah is watching them. This surah also carries a warning. It tells the oppressors that power does not protect them from accountability. Just because they dominate the present does not mean they control the future. For the early Muslims, this was oxygen. They were being humiliated publicly. They were being told their faith was weak, that their numbers were small, that their suffering meant Allah had abandoned them. But Surah Al-Buruj says the opposite. It says, suffering does not mean defeat. Sometimes it is proof of sincerity. Sometimes it is elevation. Sometimes it is preparation. The people of the trench were burned, yet Allah honored them in revelation. The early Muslims were persecuted, yet within years, Islam would rise beyond Makkah. The message was clear: oppression is temporary, faith is not. And that message still echoes today, because every generation faces its own test. Every believer faces moments where truth feels costly. But Surah Al-Buruj reminds us the fire does not define the believer. What defines the believer is what they choose when standing before it. The king believed fire was final. He believed flames ended stories. He believed once bodies turned to ash, memory would fade with them. But he misunderstood something fundamental. Fire can destroy flesh. It cannot destroy faith. The trenches were meant to erase belief from the earth. Instead, they etched it into eternity. The believers were pushed into flames, but their names were lifted into revelation. Their sacrifice became part of the Quran, recited across centuries, across continents, across generations. The king's throne disappeared. His power dissolved. His name is barely remembered, but the believers he tried to erase are remembered every time Surah Al-Buruj is recited. That is the irony of tyranny. It believes it is permanent. It never is. The flames that night were loud, violent, terrifying, but they were temporary. They burned fiercely, and then they died. The faith of the believers was quiet, steady, invisible to the eye. But it did not die. It rose. The king thought he had demonstrated power. What he truly demonstrated was fear. Fear of losing control, fear of losing loyalty, fear of truth spreading beyond his authority. The believers, by contrast, demonstrated certainty. They did not possess armies. They did not possess wealth. They did not possess political influence, but they possessed something stronger, conviction. And conviction, when rooted in truth, outlives oppression. Surah Al-Buruj does not present this story as a tragedy without meaning. It frames it as victory beyond the material world. The believers lost their lives, but they gained what the king could never control: paradise. The tyrant burned people in a trench. Allah warns of a fire greater than any trench. The tyrant believed he was judge. Allah reminds us he is Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim, the Almighty, the All-Wise. This story forces one final question. Who truly lost that day? The ones who stepped into the flames with faith, or the one who sat beside the fire thinking he had won? The believers' bodies perished, but their courage became immortal. The king's power looked absolute, but it was fragile. History is filled with rulers who thought they were untouchable. Their palaces crumble, their statues fall, their empires fade. But faith, when tested and proven, becomes unbreakable. That is why Surah Al-Buruj is not just a story of the past. It is a reminder for the present. Every believer faces moments of pressure, moments where standing firm feels costly, moments where compromise seems easier. The people of the trench remind us, truth is not measured by comfort, it is measured by conviction. The flames rose into the sky that night, but their faith rose higher, and in the end the fire did not win. Faith did.